The lungs of the earth are going to be given back to it, which is all these trees and all of these flowers, and there's going to be a whole total different vibration.
The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice in thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no fella is come up against us.
Because the Lord is going to restore everything. You're going to have a total different vibration on the earth, a total different smell. You're not going to be walking down the street and smell shit and piss, and no foul odors or nothing like that, because the lungs of the earth are going to be given back to it, which is all these trees and all of these flowers, and it's going to be a whole total different vibration. You're going to see the aura and how things are going to change and how elevated things are going to be. Our senses are going to be heightened, Everything about us is going to be glorified.
The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice in thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no fella is come up against us. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakodash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to our younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Shah. All right, and what I want to get into today, we're dealing with, checkmate for prophecy. Checkmate for prophecy. As we see, things unfold, out in the earth, whether it's with, the devil, building this, the digital system, okay, his new world order, all right, or whether it's rumors of wars, whether it's civil unrest, whether it's Jacob's trouble, well, it all plays in the favor of prophecy. Everything is working towards the will of Yahweh Bashem Shah. There's nothing, that's working outside the wisdom, okay, of the Heavenly Father. So what we're seeing now, the devil, making these moves, and, he's pushing propaganda, doing psyops, and, he has a Hollywood machine, full throttle, he's all over the place, trying to distract, and everything that he's doing is leading to his end, okay? No matter how the devil try to spin it, okay? No matter how he, tries to upset or offset, what's written, okay? Only thing that he can do is fulfill the will of Yahweh Bashem Shah, okay? And the Lord got the way that the devil is built, he always destroys his own kingdom, okay? From the Greeks to the Romans, okay, to the European empires, Okay, you go into the history, this devil always destroys his own empires. Okay, because of how he's made, he's just not right. He's not built to be a ruler. Okay, so no matter how much military might he has, how much influence he has, how much money and resources he has, he's just not built for rulership, man. All right, point blank, period, man. We can get all into it, and we get into things, but to simplify everything, the devil is not built for rulership. Okay, so let's go here. This is the book of Proverbs 5:21. It said, "For the ways of men are directly before the eyes of the Lord Yahweh Bashem Al Shai, and he carefully watches all of his paths, all of his comings and goings." Okay, so the Heavenly Father, all right, is watching. Okay, and he already has it ordered. He has this Esau, Edom. He has Esau's steps ordered. Okay, there's nothing, all right, Esau is doing that's out of sync with the will of the Heavenly Father. Okay, so all this devil has plotted and schemed, and you know, the Lord already got his steps ordered. All right, and you read verse 22, it says, "The iniquities done by a wicked man will trap him, and he will be held with cords, okay, with the cords of his sins." So the iniquities done by the wicked man will trap him. And this devil, only thing that he's doing is putting himself in the trap. Okay? Everything that he's doing, he's just putting himself in the trap, man. Every way he go, every step he take, he tried to go this way a little bit with the, Jacob's trouble. It's a trap. Okay, because ultimately he wants to go for the profit. That's a trap. Because when he make a move on the profit, checkmate. Okay, he wants to, go to war. He wants to wage war, and he starts going in direction. Checkmate. He's gonna lose this war. Okay, he wants to establish his new world order. Okay, but the closer he gets to, making this thing mandate, the Most High gonna checkmate his ass and destroy this whole system. Okay, so every move that this nigga make, any direction that this nigga can go, okay, it's a trap for him, man. He done. You see? Don't let the theater fool you, man. Like this man, okay, is on some type of streak. But he got this thing figured out, man. Absolutely not. Okay? The spirit sees through the madness, man, the illusion. Okay? Proverbs 5:23 says, "He will die for lack of instruction or discipline." Okay? And this man he's an example of being undisciplined, man. All right. No matter how much money or resources you give this man, he's gonna outspend himself. Okay? The power you give him, all right, he's gonna overreach. No matter how much power you give him, he's gonna overreach. No matter how much influence you will let this man have, okay, he wants to go farther to the point he wants to influence your DNA and your neural system, man. Okay, he's just undisciplined. He's not fit for rulership, man. Okay, he said he would die for lack of instruction, man. He doesn't have the ability to deal with instruction. He's gonna constantly move the goalposts to his own destruction. Okay, it says, "And in the greatness of his foolishness, he will go astray and be lost," man. All right, and Esau, he's out there, man. He's way out there to the point of no return. Okay, in the greatness of his foolishness, he's just out there, man. And now he just got to go with his move. Okay, there's no other option but for him to keep going with his moves, man. Okay, so let's go from there. Um, let's get this in another one in Proverbs. All right, the book of Proverbs, chapter. It's the book of Proverbs, chapter 1. All right, in verse 18, it said, "But when, let me see, I might read up. Yep. All right, because these nations have followed this man. Okay, to the nations have followed this man to a punishment. All right, these nations, all right, these heathens have followed Esau, Edom, okay, into this trap. Okay, and that's why they're gonna all fall together and go into captivity together. You see? So you go to Proverbs 1:10, it says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent." And this devil, he has enticed these nations into this new world order, which is complete rebellion against Yahweh Shemal Shah. And he's gonna make this thing mandate globally, man. And we know not to fall for the enticement, okay, of what the devil is trying to bring. Okay, it says, if they say, "Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us ambush the innocent without cause," man. Because we know their number one plot is to try to do away with Israel, man. Okay, and it's ironic, that the devil just has, a bloodthirst for these for South America all of a sudden, Central and South America all of a sudden, which he's been, doing wickedness. Okay, but it's like a renewed, bloodthirst, man. On the tribes in America, you know, you see. So this devil, all right, it's like his mind is made up. Okay, and the Lord has his mind made up. See, the Lord has Esau's mind made up. Okay, to where he just got to go with his move. You see, and it says, let's jump down here. I'll jump down to the point. This verse 16 said, "For their feet run to evil, and they hurry to shed blood." And this devil is impulsive, man. Esau does a lot of things without even thinking about the ripple effect. There's certain things that this devil does on the whim just because he's able to do it. Okay? Don't always think that this man got it figured out. He has think tanks and he has the things figured out, but it's organized wickedness. Okay? And there's a moment when this devil just does things on the whim. You see? Without the next step, okay, in progress, man. Now, it's the certain things that he has planned out and, step for step and gradualism. Okay, but in the midst of that, this devil's impulsive, man. Okay, you can't put that past him like, you know, this devil is impulsive at times, man. Okay, and he said that for their feet run to evil and they hurry to shed blood, man. Okay, he's all about war. Okay, he's all about some type of scheme, you know, some type of treachery. You see, he can't resist. See, Esau can't resist himself, and the Most High built him not to be able to resist himself, man. Okay? It says, "Indeed, it is useless to spread the baited net in the sight of any bird. But when these people set a trap for others, they lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives and rush to their destruction." Okay? So all these traps that this man has set up, he just running to his own destruction, man. And the elect gonna be, delivered. Regardless, man, the elect is gonna be that bird. Because we see this devil setting up the trap. We're that bird that's seeing this devil set up the trap. Okay? We're seeing where he's going. We know, all right, the moves that he's making is getting to his end game, which is this MOTB system, man. Okay? And we know every step that he's taking is a step towards that way. All right? And, he's making these moves, okay, to fulfill that agenda of his new world order. So, the devil, he's finna lash out, man. He's gonna go with the tribes heavy. Okay, but the elect gonna be good no matter where they at, because there's there's an elect, okay, across the four winds. The scriptures speak about how Yahweh Shai is coming to get his elect from the four winds. So wherever they might be, whether they're in Central South America, we know the bulk, the main deliverance is going to be in America. The main destruction and deliverance. America is the main stage of destruction and deliverance. Okay, in end time prophecy, man. Okay, but it's going to be a global deliverance as well. You got brothers, in camps throughout the earth as a token for that. So wherever the elect are, they're going to be delivered. They're going to be like that bird that's escaped, all right, from the snare or the trap or the fowler, as it says in Psalms. But ultimately, getting back to the point, verse 18, but when these people say they trap for others, they lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives and rush to their destruction. So Esau just running to his end. Because after he did, this thing with Venezuela, we're going to get Cuba, Colombia, Greenland, this and that. We're going to, Iran, and all he's doing is running to his destruction, man. Okay? In his mind, he think he's solidifying his power on the earth. Okay? But according to prophecy, he's running to his destruction, man. And it's a beautiful thing that the Lord is allowing us to see this, man, self-destruct right before our eyes, man. So let's go from here. I want to get this video, and it goes into the history of how we got to this moment, dealing with the Venezuela incident. I just want to touch on the history, the timeline leading to it, because we've done multiple videos on it, but just to connect this with what's going on globally, so many angles. The Spirit gave a lot of content, dealing with this situation, but just to link it to, some history to it, how we got to this point, and also how it ties into prophecy, man. Okay. Now, as you brothers, you few sisters know, AI is beginning to change, content, this devil. All right, because it's a war, it's a spiritual war, So this devil in it and the truth is consuming this man. You see? So because this guy here, he's usually, accurate with his information. He's usually on point with his information, but there's a few things where it get to a certain point. So I just need a certain part of the video, but if you watch the whole video, there's certain information that's incorrect, So I'm gonna play it to a point, and then after that, you can tell AI, tamper with some things, okay? And then it's also too, Esau be having, these AI, content creators, okay? That's meant to reel you in and then start putting misinformation. But the water, Yahweh Bashim Shai, for the Holy Spirit, for the spirit of being circumspect, brothers be on it. So I'm gonna play a little portion of it, mainly dealing with the history, how we got to, where we at, now. Okay, dealing with this whole thing and the global, implications and, how the interconnectivity with the global, the global stage, pertaining to prophecy, man. All right, so let's play this. And we'll get some more precepts.
On January 3rd, 2026, 2 days ago, U.S. Special Operations Forces landed in Caracas, Venezuela, and captured the sitting president of a sovereign nation. Nicolas Maduro was taken into custody, flown to the United States, and is now being held on drug trafficking and terrorism charges. The U.S. government called it a law enforcement operation. The rest of the world called it an invasion. You probably saw the headlines. You probably saw the official statement. The president of the United States stood at a podium and said this was about national security, about stopping drug cartels, about protecting democracy. But that is not what this was about. This was about oil. This was about the petrodollar. And this was about sending a message to every country on earth that if you try to sell oil in anything other than US dollars, we will remove your government by force. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, 303 billion barrels.
And he's been doing this for a while, to any nation that will try to operate outside the dollar. Okay? Because as we know, he's transitioning into a new system. And what's happening, these nations are trying to go into the new world order as strong as possible. Because they're all in agreement, when it comes to this new world order. All right. And what you have, it's becoming a heated competition of who's going to go into this system the strongest. Okay. As you look at these things play out, they're vying, all right, for who's going to go into this new system the strongest. Okay. And the American dollar gives America a lot of leverage. Okay. Because we have to understand, these, all right, Edomites, okay, these elites, okay, they already have regions of the earth, that these elite families run. Okay. And they want their region to go in the strongest. Now they need the populations weakened. Okay. But the regions, that they plan on, carving the earth up in, they're already trying to procure resources for their region going into the new world order. Okay. Well, like I said, they need the population to be weakened. They need to be depopulated. They need people to be desperate, the masses. Okay. But these heathens with Esau, they always fight amongst each other. Okay. When they get to a certain point, they agree to a point, and then they go at it when they get to a certain point. Okay. So this is, what we're beginning to see. Okay. Because there's elite banking families that's behind China, that's behind Russia. Okay. There's elite banking families, in the West. All right. So it's getting interesting, man. And the Lord got these devils, all right, in the trap. You see, if they have their mind on trapping, the majority, the masses, okay, most High has these niggas in the trap, man. So let's play some more.
Sell oil in anything other than US dollars, we will remove your government by force. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, 303 billion barrels, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than Iraq. For 50 years, Venezuela sold that oil in US dollars. But over the past 6 years, Venezuela stopped using dollars. They started selling to China in yuan. They started trading with Russia in rubles. They started using barter systems with Iran. They walked away from the petrodollar. And now their president is in a US prison. This is not about democracy. This is not about drugs. This is about what happens when you challenge the foundation of American financial power. The petrodollar is not a suggestion. It is an enforcement system. And Venezuela just became the example. But here's the part the US government did not think through. By invading Venezuela to enforce the petrodollar, they just showed every other oil-producing country exactly what the system really is. It is not an economic arrangement. It is a protection racket backed by military force. And when you show the world that the dollar system is maintained through invasions and regime change, you do not strengthen the system. You accelerate its collapse. China is watching. Saudi Arabia is watching. Russia is watching. And they are all asking the same question. If the US is willing to invade Venezuela to stop de-dollarization, what will they do to us? And the answer they are arriving at is simple. We need to leave the dollar system as fast as possible before we are next. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how Venezuela went from being a founding member of OPEC and a key US oil supplier to a country that was invaded for leaving the dollar system. I am going to show you the 27-year timeline from Hugo Chavez taking power to US forces landing in Caracas 48 hours ago. I'm going to show you the $800 billion in oil trade that Venezuela shifted out of dollars and why that made them a target. And I am going to show you why the January 3rd invasion is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the end of the petrodollar itself. Because when you enforce a system through military power, you do not get compliance. You get resistance. And right now, 14 countries are accelerating their plans to exit the dollar system. They watched what happened to Venezuela, and they are not going to let it happen to them. This is not financial advice. This is a geopolitical analysis of how the United States just made the single biggest strategic mistake since the Iraq War. And you're going to pay for it at the gas pump, at the grocery store, and in your retirement account. Let me start at the beginning, because to understand why the US invaded Venezuela on January 3rd, 2026, you need to understand what Venezuela was before Hugo Chavez and what it became after. Venezuela was discovered to have massive oil reserves in the early 20th century. By the 1970s, Venezuela was one of the founding members of OPEC and one of the largest oil exporters in the world. Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, was supplying over 1.5 million barrels per day to US refineries. The oil came to Texas and Louisiana. It was refined into gasoline and diesel. It powered the US economy. And every single barrel was paid for in US dollars. This was the petrodollar system. Venezuela produced oil. The US bought it in dollars. Venezuela took those dollars and bought US goods, US weapons, and US treasury bonds. The dollar circulated back to the United States. It was a closed loop. Venezuela got rich. The US got cheap oil and a market for its debt. Everybody won. But this system had one requirement.
And when they say Venezuela got rich, all right, it was speaking about, okay, the elites of Venezuela, okay, and these oil companies. You see, it was talking about the elites, certain sellouts, within Venezuela government, okay, and those oil companies pumping their oil, okay. That's who the money was circulating between, all right, because they need sellout governments to make, laws and, certain, exemptions, okay, when it came to these corporations, all right, these oil tycoons, okay, the average, all right, Venezuelan wasn't getting the benefits of this, of these oil reserves. Okay.
Venezuela had to stay inside the dollar system. They had to price their oil in dollars. They had to accept payment in dollars. They had to keep their reserves in dollars. If they ever left the dollar system, the entire arrangement would break down. For decades, this was not a problem. Venezuelan presidents understood the deal. You stay in the dollar system, you get access to US markets and protection. You leave the dollar system, you become an enemy. It was simple. And it worked. Then, in 1999, Hugo Chavez was elected president, and he did not agree to the deal. Hugo Chavez was a former military officer who ran on a platform of economic nationalism and anti-imperialism. He looked at Venezuela's oil wealth and asked a simple question. Why are we selling our oil to the United States for dollars when we could sell it to the highest bidder in any currency? Why are we allowing US companies to extract profits from our resources? Why are we integrated into a financial system that allows the US to control our economy through currency and debt? In 2000, Chavez made his first major move. He traveled to Iraq and met with Saddam Hussein. This was during the sanctions era when the US had isolated Iraq. Chavez shook hands.
So it should all be tying together. All right. So he met with Saddam in 2000. Okay. 9/11 was in 2001. Okay. Just when Saddam was getting ready to take Iraq oil off the petrodollar. Okay. It should all be tying together. All right. This is how the devils get down, man. This is nothing new what they're doing. They just extremely more tacky than what they used to be, because the Lord is revealing these devils. They're in decline, man. Esau is in decline. Okay.
Hands with Saddam on television and announced that Venezuela would sell oil to Iraq in exchange for goods, not dollars, barter. This was a direct challenge to the petrodollar. In 2001, Chavez pushed through a new hydrocarbons law that gave the Venezuelan government majority control over all oil projects in the country. U.S. oil companies like ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips, which had operated in Venezuela for decades, were told they had to give up majority ownership or leave. Most of them left. In 2005, Chavez began selling oil to China under long-term contracts. The terms were simple. China would provide infrastructure loans and investments. Venezuela would repay the loans in oil, no dollars involved. This was the beginning of the Venezuela-China oil for loans program that would eventually reach $60 billion. In 2006, Chavez announced that Venezuela would sell oil to Cuba at subsidized rates in exchange for Cuban doctors and teachers. Again, no dollars. Barter. In 2007, Chavez pulled Venezuela out of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. He said these institutions were tools of U.S. economic control. He paid off all of Venezuela's debts to them and stopped participating in their programs. By 2008, Chavez was openly calling for the end of the petrodollar.
He paid off all the debts. You see? And this system is about debt. All right? Because Esau bring in all this infrastructure. Okay, and we have to understand Esau brings the infrastructure in so he can steal. Okay? So Hugo Chavez paid off all the debt. Ain't that the point? If I'm square with you, Willie, but he's the devil. He can never have enough. Okay? Because if he has the government in debt, well, he has the people in debt. Okay? This system doesn't operate without the earth being in debt to this nigga, man. You see? Let's play it back some more, man. Goddamn devil, man.
Over all oil projects in the country. U.S. oil companies like ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips, which had operated in Venezuela for decades, were told they had to give up majority ownership or leave. Most of them left. In 2005, Chavez began selling oil to China under long-term contracts. The terms were simple. China would provide infrastructure loans and investments. Venezuela would repay the loans in oil, no dollars involved. This was the beginning of the Venezuela-China Oil for Loans program that would eventually reach $60 billion. In 2006, Chavez announced that Venezuela would sell oil to Cuba at subsidized rates in exchange for Cuban doctors and teachers. Again, no dollars. Barter. In 2007, Chavez pulled Venezuela out of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. He said these institutions were tools of U.S. economic control. He paid off all of Venezuela's debts to them and stopped participating in their programs. By 2008, Chavez was openly calling for the end of the petrodollar. He gave speeches at the United Nations, saying that the world should create a new reserve currency to replace the dollar. He proposed a South American currency called the sucre to facilitate trade without dollars. He was building alliances with Iran, Russia, and China based on the idea of creating a non-dollar trading bloc. And the US government watched all of this and realized they had a problem. Venezuela was not just leaving the petrodollar. They were actively trying to build an alternative system and convince other countries to join them. If other oil exporters followed Venezuela's lead, the entire petrodollar system would collapse. But the US did not invade in 2008. They tried regime change through other means. In 2002, there was a coup attempt against Chavez. He was briefly removed from power. The US denied involvement, but it was later confirmed that the CIA had provided support to the coup plotters. The coup failed. Chavez returned to power within 48 hours. The US tried again in 2004 with a recall referendum. They funded opposition groups. They used NGOs and media campaigns to try to turn the Venezuelan people against Chavez. The referendum failed. Chavez won with 59% of the vote. So the US moved to economic warfare. If they could not remove Chavez directly, they would strangle the Venezuelan economy until the people removed him themselves. Hugo Chavez died of cancer in 2013. His vice president, Nicolas Maduro, took over. Maduro continued Chavez's policies.
So Maduro was the vice president, okay, of Chavez. Okay. So this is where you see, okay, the cloth that Maduro was cut from. Okay.
Continued moving away from the dollar. He continued strengthening ties with China and Russia, and the US continued trying to remove him. In 2015, President Obama declared Venezuela a national security threat and imposed the first round of sanctions. These were targeted sanctions on specific Venezuelan officials, but they signaled the beginning of a coordinated economic attack. In 2017, the Trump administration massively escalated the sanctions. Here's what they did. They banned US companies from buying Venezuelan oil. This immediately cut off Venezuela's largest customer. The US had been buying 500,000 barrels per day from Venezuela. That is $13.7 billion per year in oil revenue at $75 per barrel. Gone overnight. They froze all Venezuelan government assets held in US banks. Venezuela had approximately $7 billion in dollar-denominated accounts in the US financial system. Frozen. Venezuela could not access its own money. They prohibited US companies from providing insurance, shipping, or financial services to Venezuelan oil tankers. This made it nearly impossible for Venezuela Venezuela to sell oil to anyone because most international shipping and insurance is denominated in dollars and facilitated by US or European companies. Even if China wanted to buy Venezuelan oil, getting that oil from Venezuela to China required ships, insurance, and payment systems that were now prohibited from working with Venezuela. They banned Venezuela from issuing new debt in US markets. This cut Venezuela off from international capital markets. They could not borrow money to finance government operations or oil production. And most devastatingly, they prohibited US companies from selling spare parts, equipment, or technology to PDVSA. Venezuela's oil infrastructure was built with American equipment. The refineries, the drilling rigs, the pumps, all of it required American parts and expertise to maintain. When the US banned the sale of these parts, Venezuela's oil production began collapsing. The numbers tell the story. In 2016, before sanctions, Venezuela was producing 2.4 million barrels per day. By 2020, production had fallen to 500,000 barrels per day, an 80% collapse. Oil revenue fell from $56 billion per year to $11 billion per year. The economy imploded. Hyperinflation hit 1.7 million percent at its peak. People were starving. The country was in crisis. The US government said this was about democracy and human rights. But let me show you the comparison that proves this was about the petrodollar. Iran, heavily sanctioned for decades, currently under massive sanctions. Why? Because Iran sells oil in non-dollar currencies and challenges US dominance. Iran's human rights record is worse than Venezuela's. But the primary issue is not human rights. It is oil and the dollar. Russia. Sanctions intensified after 2022. Why? Because Russia began demanding payment for oil and gas in rubles, not dollars. The US said it was about Ukraine, but look at the financial warfare. They froze $300 billion in Russian reserves. They cut Russia out of SWIFT. They targeted Russian oil exports. This is dollar enforcement. Saudi Arabia. Terrible human rights record. Killed a journalist, bombs Yemen. No sanctions. Why? Because Saudi Arabia sells oil exclusively in dollars and recycles those dollars into US Treasury bonds. Saudi Arabia is inside the petrodollar system. Therefore, Saudi Arabia is an ally, no matter what they do. The pattern is clear. If you sell oil in dollars, you are protected. If you sell oil in anything other than dollars, you are sanctioned, isolated, and regime changed. This is not about human rights. This is about maintaining the petrodollar. And Venezuela understood this, so they made a choice. If the US is going to sanction us and try to destroy our economy anyway, we might as well completely abandon the dollar and build an alternative system. Here's what Venezuela did between 2017 and 2025. They sold oil to China in yuan. China became Venezuela's largest customer, buying approximately 500,000 barrels per day by 2024. All transactions in yuan, $0. That is $13.7 billion per year in non-dollar oil sales. They sold oil to India in rupees. India needed cheap oil and was willing to ignore US sanctions. India bought 200,000 barrels per day, paid in rupees. That is $5.5 billion per year in non-dollar sales. They sold oil to Russia in a barter system. Venezuela shipped oil to Russia. Russia shipped wheat, machinery, and military equipment to Venezuela. No currency involved, direct barter. This circumvented sanctions entirely. They created bilateral payment systems with Iran, Cuba, and Nicaragua. These countries all faced US sanctions. They built clearing mechanisms to trade with each other without using dollars. Venezuela traded oil for Iranian gasoline and chemicals. The value was approximately $2 billion per year. They launched the Petro, a cryptocurrency supposedly backed by Venezuelan oil reserves. The Petro was an attempt to create a digital currency that could be used for international trade without touching the dollar system. It failed to gain significant adoption, but it showed the direction Venezuela was moving. They negotiated debt repayments to China in oil, not dollars. Venezuela owed China approximately $20 billion from infrastructure loans made during the Chavez era. Instead of repaying in dollars, Venezuela repaid in oil shipments. This was oil for debt, not oil for dollars. Add it all up. By 2025, Venezuela was selling approximately 900,000 barrels per day in non-dollar currencies and barter arrangements. At $75 per barrel, that is $24.7 billion in annual oil sales that were not using the US dollar. For a country with the world's largest oil reserves, this was unacceptable to the United States. But Venezuela was not alone. They were part of a broader trend. Russia was selling 5 million barrels per day in non-dollar currencies. Iran was selling 1.5 million barrels per day in yuan and euros. Saudi Arabia was negotiating with China to accept yuan for portions of oil sales. The petrodollar was not just losing Venezuela. It was losing its grip on the entire global oil market. By late 2025, an estimated 15% of global oil trade was occurring in non-dollar currencies. That is approximately $410 billion per year out of $2.74 trillion in total global oil sales. The trend was accelerating. Projections suggested this could reach 25 to 30% by 2027. And then, on December 28, 2025, China and Venezuela announced a new agreement, $80 billion over 5 years. China would rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure. In exchange, Venezuela would supply 1.2 million barrels per day to China, all transactions in yuan. This was the breaking point, because this deal was not just about oil sales, it was about infrastructure. China was investing in Venezuela's long-term production capacity. They were building refineries, pipelines, ports. They were integrating Venezuela into the yuan system permanently. This was not a temporary arrangement. This was China locking in the world's largest oil reserve outside the dollar system for decades. The US government made a decision. If we allow this to proceed, if we allow China to lock in Venezuela's 303 billion barrels of reserves in yuan, the petrodollar will be finished. Other countries will follow. Saudi Arabia will flip. The entire system will collapse. So on January 3rd, 2026, they invaded. At 3:47 a.m. local time, U.S. Special Operations Forces landed at multiple locations in Caracas. The operation was conducted under Title 10 military authority, not Title 50 covert action, meaning this was an acknowledged military operation.
So yeah, that's the point. I just want to get, a timeline, dealing with Venezuela history, the oil market, dealing with OPEC, and how, Esau just a damn devil, man, just to sum it up. Okay. Here it is. People clear their debts with them. They just want to keep you so restricted, to this dollar system to where they can control your economy. Okay. Pretty much this devil has, through the dollar, he's put these nations on a social credit score, to where you have to behave a certain way to participate in the market. You see, this market has been heavily dominated by America, not just militarily, but economically, man. And see, these nations are to the point where, like, man, we can't operate like this, man. With an American hand around their throat. Okay, and one wrong move, all right, hey, America hit you with the squeeze. And now your country is in the uproar. Okay, and it shows you America don't care about the populations of these nations, man. America don't care about their own population. Okay, so let's go here because it spoke about how I want to get this real quick. How Chavez was he wanted economic nationalism. So you go into what is that when you go into let's go here. All right, so when you go into economic nationalism, it says is a approach to economic policy, and this was Chavez was about. That prioritizes a country's own industries, workers, or national interests over international cooperation or global integration. In simple terms, it means protecting and promoting the domestic economy, even if that limits foreign trade or investment. Key features of economic nationalism: protectionism, using tariffs, quotas, and import restrictions to protect local industry from foreign competition, encouraging people and business to buy locally made goods, government support or control of key industry subsidies, state-owned enterprises, limiting foreign companies' control over strategic sectors like energy, defense, and telecommunication, reducing dependence on other countries for essential goods or resources. Goals was to project jobs and wages, strengthen national industries, maintain control over strategic resources, increase national self-sufficiency. Okay, and that's what Chavez was about, and not saying, these guys, Chavez and, Maduro was these perfect guys. Okay. But they did have the interests of their people in mind. Okay. Now dealing, with Maduro, it's so much, dealing with Esau what he got going on in the background. So, how that played out, okay? But even if, just speaking in general, but even if you want to do right by your people or do the best you can by your people, Esau, he put you in such a bind that you can't do anything. Okay, he frees your assets, them billions of dollars just frozen, sitting in America accounts while people are starving, man. Literally starving. Okay? And this all the devil does. And see, the earth is looking at this nigga at the West, especially American, like, look, this nigga is absolutely crazy, man. You gotta understand the rest of the world, there's corruption. These heathens are off and uh they have these false gods and everything that they're into, you see. But there's still some type of integrity how the rest of the world, there's a piece of integrity and decency how the rest of the world operates, but America is just that nigga in the room. America just standing out as that nigga in the room. Okay? They'll just shoot up anything, anywhere. All right, this nigga don't play by no rules, and they looking at this nigga like, this nigga is crazy, man. We gotta do something about this guy, man. So all these moves that this devil is making, he's running to his own end. Okay, and the rest of the earth, is let me see. Let's go here. But all these nations, the Lord is bringing all these nations together. Okay, for the purpose of destroying America, man. Okay, all these nuclear capable nations, okay, are coming together for the destruction of America, man. Get the whore out of here, man. Okay. So let's go here because that's what all roads lead to. Okay, because America just unreasonable, man. You see. Let's go. It's in Psalms. I'm gonna get this in Psalms. This is the book of Psalm, chapter 7, and verse 11. It said, "The Most High is a righteous judge," and the Most High, it says, and a power who is ignorant, all right, which is a righteous anger every day. Let me get this in the KJV. You read a little better in the KJV. All right, this Psalm 7 and 11 says, "The Most High judges the righteous, and the Most High is angry with the wicked every day." Okay, so every day that goes by, the Most High is more angry at this nigga, man. All right, and the Lord is just reserving that wrath for his ass, man. And Esau is running to the Lord's wrath. It's going to go bad for your mans. Okay, it says, "If he turn not, he will whet his sword. He have bent his bow and made it ready." Man, these are the nukes, man. All right, and Esau not going to turn. Esau not going to repent. He's not going to, all right, turn from his path of destruction and chaos. Okay, trying to replace the Most High. Okay, so the Most High has that sword. When you wear the sword and you sharpen it, you're getting it ready to be used. Okay, so these missiles are sharpened and ready for use, man. Okay, and these missiles were made to destroy America, man. Okay, the Lord allowed this man, all right, to tap into nuclear technology, nuclear physics, to split the atom. Okay, for the purpose of destroying America, man. You see, it said he have also prepared for him the instruments of death. He ordained his arrows against the persecutors. Okay, so the Lord has allowed this man to mass produce these weapons for his own destruction. And these destruction, these missiles are going to hit other places, man, but America is going to get brunt. Okay, America is going to be completely turned into a desert. You see, it says, "Behold, he travaileth with iniquity, and have conceived mischief, and brought forth falsehood." Okay, and that's all this man has brought forth is falsehood, man, to where everything now it's to the point where everything this nigga say is just a complete lie. Okay, everything that this man says, man, when you listen to Trump talk, it's just a complete lie, man, from beginning to end. It's the exact opposite of what's really happening, man. What this nigga is talking about. Okay, what these devils are talking about, man, and that's all he can bring forth. Okay, is lies, man. You see, and he's coming to the end of the road. Okay, he done told he's at the point to where he's done told every lie that can be told. Okay, he's at the end of the road, man. All right, he done played around with the dollar as long as he can, and now he wants to switch to, this digital system. Okay, and it's all going to fail, man. It says he made a pit and digged it, and is falling into the ditch which he made. Okay, so this pit, which he's making, he's creating a, he plans on creating a digital enslavement for the masses, man. Okay, with this same pit that he's digging, guess what? He's going to fall into high tech slavery because he's going into slavery under gods, under Yahweh Shai. Okay, you see the first fruit, okay, which are going to be gods in the earth, man. So he plans on putting people in high tech slavery. No, he's going into high tech slavery, man. Okay, well, his every move, and you see, is going to be monitored and tracked. Okay, verse 16 it says, "His mischief shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealings, all right, shall come down upon his own pate, all right, which is his head." So everything that this devil is doing, all right, this system is just going to implode on itself. Okay, and it's going to lead him, as the scriptures say, to the king of terrors, to Yahweh Shai. Okay, the ultimate judge. Okay, under the Most High, man. You see, verse 17 it says, "And I will praise the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai according to his righteousness, and will sing praise to the name of the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai, the Most High, man." And that's gonna be us forever, man. Giving praise to our power for his righteousness, man. Because now I say one thing this kingdom has taught us is to appreciate righteousness, man. Okay, because this is complete madness how this man is running the earth, man. This is complete hell. Okay, how this man runs the earth, man. It's anti-life. And this man, he's at the end of his road, man. Okay, he ain't got much road left. He ain't got too many moves left. Okay, he has no choice but to step into the trap, which is his end, man. So that's the point. Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edify once again. I'm gonna give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem Kakodash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to our younger brothers, and peace and blessing salutations to the hopeful Shalom.